bowstring needs to be very, very strong because it's under an awful lot of strain, and also it needs to be reasonably abrasion resistant, and more importantly perhaps is it doesn't need to stretch, because the power of the bow is coming from the energy that's stored in the wood. Dacron is an affordable material that does all of those things. What I've done here is I've set up a couple of G-clamps really just to catch the string on it, about 18 inches, maybe 2 feet longer than the bow, because what I'm going to have to do is have enough material to form this loop and come all the way down back in and splice in and hold it. This thing is purely held by friction, so it's all about being able to make cordage reasonably well. So what we need to do is make sure we've got enough string that it will go over, form the loop, and then come back in and be spliced back on itself. And this is what gives it the loop its security, if you like. It works on friction. So simplistically, we're just going to use 2 strands essentially, or 2 bundles of fibres. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my roll of Dacron and just make a little overhand loop. Nothing special here, no kind of particular knot needed. It's just to secure it on the G-clamp. And I'm just going to run out 12 strands. Obviously the number of strands here is relative to the bow weight. The stronger the bow, obviously the more strain is under it. If we put too many strands in here, we add to the weight of the string, which just makes the whole thing a bit less efficient. And now I'm going to separate these guys into 2 bundles. This is called hanking. I think hanking any string, this is quite a good method to do it with. And then I'll just make a little half hitch, so a little loop if you like, that goes over and just holds these guys securely. It's quite important that throughout this process these are allowed to spin, otherwise it won't twist up properly to make the loop. So the next thing to do really is to put them together and then fold them over, but stagger them slightly so they don't run out at the same time, making the loop if you like, and then these will come back down. So I need enough to go over to hold it by friction. It's no good me just doing that much, because if I make a spliced loop with only that many fibres, the whole thing will just pull out when it goes under strain. And we'll find a place roughly halfway, clamp it with one finger and thumb, and twist with the other finger and thumb to the point that it wants to kink up. There you go. And then when it does start to kink up, we just help it along, like so. And then we come to the point where this joins, this cordage that we've made joins with the new fibres. A twist and clamp, twist and clamp. And then let go, and it wanted to turn up, and as you can see, I just helped it along. If you start twisting towards yourself, always carry on twisting towards yourself. Twist and clamp, and then if I let go, you can see these guys want to start to turn. This is another reason why we need to bundle these up so they can twist properly, and then we help them along. All I'm doing is making enough cord, if you like, that it will go over the end of my bow and slide down a little bit, maybe about 6 or 8 inches. And that I'd suggest is probably getting there, maybe another centimetre or so, just to be sure. If you've made your bow reasonably well, it won't have a really fat limb tip anyway, because having a lot of thick mass at the end of a bow is not a very good design feature. But what we've got is we've got a bundle of short fibres here, and we've got bundles of long fibres. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pair up 6 short ones with 6 long ones, 6 short ones with 6 long ones, and then coming to the point where that starts on the loop, or where the cordage starts and finishes on the loop, clamp and then twist and carry on. This time you're still effectively twisting 2 fibres, but they're now 2 fibres of 12 instead of 2 fibres of 6. So twist, clamp, let go, reverse twist, and we have this loop neatly spliced in. This is a real eureka moment for me, because this took me ages to work out, in fact years. I was making cordage and splicing it properly, trying to force the lays of the rope apart and put a spliced eye in there until I sort of saw a snippet somewhere in a book and had a eureka moment and realised how they were doing it. Carry on till I go a little bit past the longest lot of fibres there. Right, so that's gone a little bit past that last lot of fibres, as you can see, and they're sticking off, and I can melt those off and effectively they would stick down. I could glue those down. I could even wrap some serving along it, and you can even serve the loop if you want. To make this really neat here, what you can also do, as well as staggering the two bundles that came over, you can stagger the individual fibres so they run out completely in a really nice long taper. I'm just going to hook this onto the end of the G-clamp, undo the bundles and walk them back to make sure that every fibre there is going to be pulling and doing its work. So we only loosely wrap them around at this stage. The principle being that we want all of these fibres doing some work. So we wrap it round loosely and then hold it together with wax, rather than carrying on the cord all the way down. In reality, I have made bowstrings by carrying the cord all the way down. The problem is, obviously, as you're twisting it up, you're going to shorten it. So if you want to make a string that actually looks like a string, you probably have to leave 3 feet, maybe even a bit more, longer than the bow to be able to get round and do it, otherwise the bow's too short. So I've come down here, and then what I'm going to do, just with some normal beeswax, is just rub this in and get it all sticking together nicely. I think it's quite important to be able to adjust the height that you set the string out, or the brace height as it's called. So what I do is I put a little bit of cordage around here because it makes the knot a little bit less likely to be abraded. And the knot we're going to use here is a timber hitch, which is sometimes called a bowyer's knot. So we go round the bottom of the bow, and then what's really important is that as we come back round, we go back on ourselves to form an eye. So you can see there's an eye there, and then it just gets wrapped around. Minimum of 3 times is the recommendation. And then works purely on friction. So while the strain's on it, it won't come undone, and yet when it's off, it's really easy to unpick. So I'll just cut the excess off here. It's a little bit short, this brace height, but so I will adjust this in a second. And then the final thing that we need to do is to serve this area here, which is involving wrapping it essentially. And what this does is it protects the string from your fingers and from the arrow knock. It's useful to be able to move the brace height up and down. Some bows shoot better with a slightly lower brace height, some with a slightly higher brace height. And with wooden bows, they are quite individual, and it's worth experimenting. So now what I need to do is think about where I'm going to put the serve in. So with a traditional bow, you tend to shoot off of your hand. So what I mean by that is that my hand becomes the arrow rest. So if I put the arrow in the bow here, I can see that kind of roughly this area here is the bit that's going to need protecting. And to allow myself some adjustment if I do need to fiddle with the brace height, because obviously if I shorten or lengthen the string, this is going to slide up or down depending. I'm just going to give myself maybe 5 or 6 inches of serving there to give myself some options. So I'm going to use some modern serving material. It's very tough stuff, and again, it's anything though that's abrasion resistant. So what I start by doing is laying a loop over the string and then capturing that loop with half a dozen wraps. Once I've done that, I pull the tail end of this loop out of the way and carry on wrapping. And then give this a tug, and that should tighten up. And then I need a little rod. I'll just use an arrow shaft for now, because what I'm going to try and do is take the end of this serving and thread it through all of those loops and then pull it tight. It should hopefully lock it in. So what I'll slide that arrow shaft off, take the end of that piece of serving, pull them all through and then pull it tight, which should hold it in anyway. If you're in any doubt, there's nothing wrong with putting a little dab of glue on there just to hold it in. And then I'll just trim off the excess. So hopefully that should measure up with my hands, be protecting the bowstring from the arrow. And the only thing left really is to give it a shoot.